All right, so welcome to Rock Your Code, Code and App Performance for Microsoft.net. I'm David McCarter. I'm excited to finally, I think this is my first official session for the year. And I'm excited to start speaking again, even in person this year. So I'm getting excited about those events. Anyway, I'm David McCarter. I'm a Microsoft MVP, C# Corner MVP, featured writer. I just got a new gig as an enterprise architect for a company in Salt Lake City. And there's all the rest of the stuff, and there's how to contact me. All that will be at the end. So don't worry if you missed it. I just want to give a shout out to the Ukraine, and I hope after, Code Camp is over and you guys are all happy with all the code stuff you learned, please, give a few minutes and think about the Ukraine and send your thoughts and prayers to the people there. And if you can support them in any way, I please hope you do, because I've been to the Ukraine. I've been to Lviv, where they're reporting out of right now. My hotel was 1 block away, not even a block, half a block away from the town center of Lviv. And these are some pictures from my trip. And I just want to say that, ever since I've been to the Ukraine, I've been wanting to go back. I fell in love with the country and the food and the people, and I've been wanting to go back really bad ever since. And so I hope once all this terrible war is going on, I can get back to the Ukraine and see my friends there and possibly speak. So anyway, I just want to do that because what's going on in the world right now. This talk is based off my code performance book. It's out there on Amazon right now. Those are all the chapters and all the data you'll be seeing that's in the book, and even more now because I've added more. Over 3,400 benchmark tests is how I come up with the information I'm going to share with you today and in my book and online. And I'll talk more about that later. Also, as I was alluding to before the session started, 100% of the proceeds from this book goes to the Voice of Slum NGO in India, where I visited in 2019. And I was able, and because of the money from my book, they've been able to restart their vocational training for women so they can support their families. So I'm really happy about the support I've been able to give them, but that really relies on you guys to go buy a copy of my book, or I also have a GoFundMe going on right now. If you email me, I'll send you the link to it. Also, part of code performance is really good coding standards, right? They kind of go hand in hand with each other. And so I've had the only pure coding standards book out there ever since .NET has been around. It's in its 7th edition. And so I hope you go check that out too on Amazon. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about really quick today, because like I said, I've got lots to talk about and in only 55 minutes. I'm going to do an opening act, basically why I'm so focused on code performance, general tips, strings, reference, structs, not too much in there, lots in collections, and a little bit on analyzing code. I had to cut a lot of that out because of time, and then in Encore, okay? So please feel free to ask questions. I'm not sure how fast I'll be able to get to them, but I'll definitely do my best. I have a hard time doing both at the same time. So, all right, opening act. Code performance. Code performance is something that's super, super important, and it's becoming more and more important now that we're going into the cloud. It's super, super important for the cloud because, the slower your code is, the more you're going to be charged. And that's one of the biggest complaints I hear from companies is the cost of the cloud. Well, part of that cost is your crappy coding. And so we need to clean it up before we move it to the cloud. And of course, backend servers. And because we want code to be fast, because we want a really fast, good user experience for our users. Also, I have a delivery coming from FedEx I might have to sign for, so I might have to jump up so Bill can sing a song while I'm signing that. I'm not sure when it's going to be here. And both are very important for now and the future, because if you code for performance now, you're doing it wrong. You need to code for the future. And I've done this with companies, or I've tried to do this with companies. And whenever I code, this is just something that's been ingrained in me for a long time. I always code for the future because so I don't have to deal with it later. And the big thing with code performance is memory affects performance and performance affects memory. So we're not going to talk a lot about memory in this talk. I have a whole series of articles on my website and on C# Corner talking about the proper way of just getting rid of memory in .NET and using iDisposable and things like that. They're pretty popular articles. So I hope you go check them out. We're going to be talking more just about the actual code performance today, not really the memory part too much. But they both go hand in hand, and you have to deal with both, or you're not going to get the gains you really want. So, the way I got into this was quite a while ago. I was working for this company called Certona, and at the time, it was the largest traffic site that I've worked on. Now that's going to change in a week in a little over a week when I start my new job, because they're even more. So they even have more traffic than this company. But this company's biggest traffic days were Black Friday and Cyber Monday. The rest of the year, they were pretty flat. And those were the big days. And so and I kept telling this company over and over again, you have to code for those days. You can't code for the rest of the year, because if you go down during those days, your customers can lose millions of dollars of sales. And so super important. So when I was there, they were averaging on those 2 days 20,000 transactions per second through their back end, with spikes up to 50,000 per second. That's a lot, right? And if you don't take care of code performance and memory, that can really, bring your service to a halt. And it does all the time in companies that I see. And I don't want to get into this because I'll go into a weird tangent. For some reason, they put 200 gigs of a single client's product catalog in memory. That was Nike. Their biggest customer was Nike, and their catalog was 200 gigs of memory. Kind of crazy. All right. General performance tips. These are just some simple things you can do right on Monday and not really affect, the actual code, so you don't have to go through unit testing and stuff like that. But these can help your performance really, really easily. So this is one of the things I do whenever I start on a new contract, is I do this. For each project, I remove usings, right? And there's a Power Command add-in, Power Tools for Visual Studio, that if you install it, you could do Power Commands and do remove and sort usings, and you can do that, that does it on the entire project, right? So there's a couple steps to what I'm going to tell you. The first step is you have to get rid of all the usings, because, why do you have the usings at the top of your class if you're not using them, right? And now with, new versions of .NET, they're global usings too. And if you're not using them, they shouldn't be there because they can create performance issues. Not a lot, but it can. So that's step 1 of 2. Step 2 is, now that you've got all their usings removed, now remove the references that aren't being used anymore, okay? Because you don't want them in your project. You don't want them deployed for no reason, right? So just get rid of them, right? I know with development, we put stuff in our project and then we go, we don't like it, and we try something else, but we forget to take the old stuff out, right? So you need to remove those things to clean up your project, and it will give you a little bit of performance gain. So there's a couple ways to do it. I've been doing it for a long time because I use CodeRush by DevExpress, a code refactoring tool. And if you watch my show, which I'm going to plug at the end, you can get a free copy of CodeRush if you watch my show. So if you have CodeRush, you just do remove unused references. It will go through your project. It does it one project at a time. It determines all the references aren't being used, gives you a chance to not remove them if you don't want them removed, and then it'll remove them all and clean up your project. And starting in Visual Studio 2019, they've added that feature too, but I still use the one in CodeRes. So that will clean up your project. That's the first thing I do with every project I work on, in contracting at least. And some of these tips I hope you guys know, but I have to say them because I keep seeing this over and over again. You know, I've the past 10 years I've been analyzing millions and millions of lines of code, and all the tips in this session are basically all the common things that I see developers still doing after 20 years of .NET. And one is, don't set variables to their default state. You're wasting performance, right? Don't set counter to 0. It's already 0. So why do you set it? You know, a person is already null. Don't set it to null. So you shouldn't do those things. You know, you should only set variables like that when the state that you want them in is different from the default, right? So if you want counter to start at 1, you can set it at 1, or if you want to make a new person, you can do that. So it's totally fine, but don't do the other stuff. You're just creating computer cycles that are just wasting time and performance. A couple other really quick tips. And some of this is just the kind of my pet peeves when I review code. Remove empty methods and commented out code. It doesn't need to be there. We don't need commented out code. That's why we have source code. And I was just looking at this literally an hour ago in the code base I'm working on. Get rid of all the code that's not in use anymore, right? And the code base I'm working on has a lot of this, right? And this affects performance. So anything that's not used, whether it's variables or methods or even entire classes, get them out of the project, because that can cause performance issues. And don't ignore method results. That's just a good coding practice. Now, one of the things that we do a lot in these days, especially if you're using a web API, sending data in and out of your back-end systems through services, is we serialize everything now in JSON, right? We used to be XML. All that data is on my website, but we do a lot of JSON. So there's two main ways we can do it in .NET. The popular way that's been for a very, very long time is using the Newtonsoft JSON, like you can see there. And then a couple versions ago in .NET Core, the .NET team decided to implement their own JSON serializer, and you can see those examples there. So they're very similar. They don't work exactly the same, but they're very similar in serializing the stuff. But which one is more performant, do you think? Microsoft will say theirs more performant. James Newton might say his is. Who knows? Well, according to my test, overall, right now, as of this last week, Newtonsoft is a tiny bit faster than the JSON serializer. They actually keep going back and forth. Like when one of the versions of .NET came out, the JSON serializer was actually faster than Newtonsoft, but then I think James Newton went back and fixed up his code, and they're getting closer now. But anyway, use what you want, but make sure you performance tune it, especially if you're doing tons of transactions through your backend system a second. And here's deserialization. So you can see Newtonsoft is faster than the JSON serializer right now. So I hope nobody from Microsoft is watching, because they might get mad at me. All right, strings. So strings are a big thing that we deal with a lot in .NET all the time. Sorry, I'm trying to keep track of the time. So again, I hope you know this, but checking for an empty string, I still see this down in code and in legacy code. People checking for empty string using quote, quote. Okay, don't do that. I don't even remember the last time I did that. That can cause a performance issue, because that quote, quote will create a string in memory, and then it has to be compared. And it's just not very performant. So, of course, the right way to check for an empty string in .NET, of course, is to use is null or empty or is null or white space, right? Those are the most performant ways of doing, well, is null or white space isn't super performant, but you can see here that is null or empty is quite more performant than the other ways of doing it, right? So you can see is null or white spaces is not as performant because it has to do a lot more work to check for white space. But you can see I compared it if you checked for null in quotes, that's the speed, because you should always check a string for null, right? You never operate on a string until you make sure it's not null. And then if you do null and string empty, it's pretty much the same speed. So don't use those old two methods of doing things. Make sure you use this null or empty. And there's a lot more great things you can do with null or empty too. So string comparison, before I show you this slide, this is just one way of doing string comparison in .NET. There are other ways you probably are going to tell me about. I know about them. They're in my book, but for the slide, I can only do one. And this is the simplest one because this is what I saw all over the code base that was doing the 50,000 up to 50,000 transactions a second. They did this all throughout their code consistently. They were checking if two strings were the same by making them both lowercase. Okay. And you might think, oh, that's a good way to do it. It's not. For a couple of reasons, and I'll show you the biggest reason to me. So the proper way of doing it in this case is to do toUpper with culture info, right? Because toUpper and with culture info will properly check strings no matter what language they're in, okay? toLower doesn't do that, but toUpper does. And it's very, very important for globalization. That's why I included the culture info, which most people don't use, and you should be using them because I can almost guarantee you your project's going to be converted into another language in the future sometime. So this is how you do it in this case. You do toUpper culture info invariant culture if that's what you choose, or toUpper, and then do both of them toUpper. And you can see the speed is quite a bit different, right? And depending on what version of .NET, all these samples are showing .NET 6 and .NET 5. I don't analyze .NET Framework anymore. But you can see toUpper is much faster, especially in .NET 5, than toLower. So if you're using toLower in your code base, stop it. It's you're hurting yourself. All right, reference types and structures. I'm going to go through this pretty quick because there's not a lot in this anyway, but I'd like to talk about this because it's not only is this a good way to do it, but it's a good way to set up your structures anyway. So when you're creating structures, in most cases, you should override equals. I like to override equals because I'm more in charge of what exactly makes an equal. I'm not letting .NET choose what these two objects equals as. And if you can mute your phones, your computers, I hear somebody's microphone on. Thanks. So here's an easy way to do override equals in a structure. You implement equatable, and then you have to implement those two equals things like that, two equals methods like that. And you can see here the speed is now getting pretty close to the same. They used to be different, but as .NET matures, they're getting pretty close. But I typically use override anyway, just because for example, if a type, is equal because of 3 of the fields, then using the second method there is not going to really work out for you anyway. So a little bit of gain, but it adds up. Don't override equals in classes, only structures. And also in structures, you should always implement the operators because they don't exist. if you don't. So that's why I still talk about structures in this section. Some other tips with classes and structures. Seal classes. This is something I do in all code bases. Any class that's not inheritable, I seal, right? Because that can not only can that speed up performance, but it shows intent of the class, right? So whenever I create a class, I seal it. That should be the default state of classes, but Microsoft doesn't listen to me. Use proper class access modifiers like internal, private, or protected, of course. Don't use public, only use public on purpose, right? Everybody has a tendency, and I'm not sure why this is, but everybody has a tendency to make all classes and all methods public, right? No, unless that class is designed to be exported outside of that assembly, don't make it public, because if you do, that actually creates more work on the compiler and on the jitter, and you're slowing down performance, okay? So you should always make things the proper way of the way they're intended to be used, because that can affect performance. And again, I don't have time to talk about Disposable, but this is one of the biggest killers of performance, is not properly implementing and using disposable objects. This is what I'm working on, the code base I'm on right now. I literally have been working on it since September, and I'm not even close to being done. I'm dead serious, right? This code base is kind of an older code base, and it's pretty obvious that very few people that's ever worked on this code base have any idea how memory management works in .NET. And that's what I've been working on. Because they have servers that go down every day because they have virtual memory leaks. So make sure you do those properly. Like I alluded to earlier, I have 3 articles on my website and on C# Corner that lay all this out really in detail for you. If you check out my open source project, either the code or the NuGet packages, it's now called Spargene. I've implemented, I did 2 extension methods to make this really easy for you. So the one I use all the time is called dispose fields. So what dispose fields does is you just put that in your dispose method, right? And it will investigate the fields, and if there's any fields up there that need to be disposed, it will dispose of it when dispose is called. And I call this future proofing, because I might clean up a class, right, and make sure everything is disposed of. But if some other developer comes along and puts another field level variable that's of a class that's disposable, then now all my work is mute. So that's why I created dispose fields, is because once you put that in there, you don't have to worry about all the other developers not doing it correctly. It will be done correctly for you. And something else I learned when I was working for this company with those 50,000 transactions is they put huge amounts of disposable objects in collections, which I've never seen before. I never do that ever. That's just a recipe for disaster. But because of that, I created an extension method called dispose collection, which will go through the collection and properly dispose of everything. And actually, dispose fields calls dispose collection too. So if you just use dispose fields, you'll be fine. All right, collections, big performance gains. Besides strings, I think collections are one of the biggest things we use and these days. So there's tons of ways of creating a collection. Here's the most common way I see people creating a collection. Collection equals new list of person, right? That's the most, 99.99% of the time I see people do this. This is what they do. But this is definitely not the most performant way of doing it. When you create a collection, the more performant way, if you can do it, this depends on if you can do it, is to tell the collection how many items are going to be in the collection. right? So if you already know there's 100 items that's going to be inserted into this collection, either from another collection or because some other thing that you've done in your code, make sure you implement your collection like this. It really speeds up the collection. So, well, it's getting closer again, but it's kind of a good thing to do anyway. So if you do it with capacity, it is the fastest overall here, as you can see. If you eat, and I tested, even if you do it with half of the guess, it even speeds it up, right? So with different versions of .NET, the without capacity is getting better, but if you can, just use capacity. It's just a better way of doing it. Now, looping through a collection, right? There's 4 main ways of looping through a collection. And if you want to put your main way that you use on chat, I'd love to hear which way you use. So there's ForEach, do, while, and for, right? Those are the 4 main ways to iterate through a collection. Nobody's typed yet, because I'm interested what do you guys use the most. Nobody? Want to take a drink? Mm-hmm. For each. So, which one do you think is more performant? Let me ask that. For? Okay. Oh, here's the answer. Everything is faster except for ForEach. So stop using ForEach. I've stopped using it. I never use ForEach anymore. Because for, do, while, and while are more performant than ForEach. I've tried to speed up ForEach and I haven't found a really good way of doing it. If anybody knows of a way, please let me know, but I haven't been able to find it, so I don't use it anymore. I pretty much only use for. That's basically it. So make sure you go back to work next week and change all your ForEaches. And if you use a refactoring tool, that's really easy to do. It's a right mouse click and boom, you're done. Checking for items in a collection. This is something we do all the time. Whether you're before you work on a collection or you need to report it or something else. So there's 4 main ways of checking for items in a collection in .NET. I'd be interested on what you guys think those are. So when you guys are checking to make sure there's something in the collection, what method do you use in .NET? I'd be interested to hear while I'm taking a drink. Contains, okay. Anything else? Huh?
Is any,
okay. Anybody else? No? Instance of? How about count? Use count? No? Okay. Bill uses count. Us older programmers use count, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand the question. I use count to see whether or not it's empty.
Yeah.
But if I was looking for a specific item, that's something else. So I messed up on the question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I explained it wrong. Yeah. This is only to check if there's something in the collection. Right. Worked in VB. Yeah, right, Phil. Okay, so in .NET, there's 4 main ways of doing it. You can use count, you can use any, you can use long count, and there's something brand new in .NET 6, called try get non-enumerated count. I don't know who came up with that name, but I don't like it. So those are the 4 main ways of checking to see if there's something in a collection, right? And most of all those have a way to, do a predicate or something in it to, if you're just looking for certain items. So which one do you think is more performant? Anybody got any ideas?
Well, it's right in the slide.
No, it's not the answer is not in the slide.
Any?
Any? You think it's any?
Long count. Long count.
Long count? Anybody else? So when I worked on this project that was doing 50,000 transactions a second, they used any everywhere. That's pretty much all they used. They never used count, right? And this is how I got into this, was because of that. Because I looked at that and I went, is that really more performant? So for checking for items in the collection in .NET, now in .NET 5 or 6, long count. Stop using the other ones. Long count is more performant, as you can see here, by a lot. Okay. I didn't put the other .NET 6 one on here because I didn't have time, but it's basically the same. It's around the same speed as any. So the new count in .NET 6 is actually not performant as a long count, unfortunately. So go home, go back to work and change everything to long count. Now checking for items in an array, same question. I'm not going to ask you this question, but a lot of people use count for arrays. Stop it. If you're checking to see if there's something in an array, use the length. Okay, it's four times the speed. Hold on, FedEx is here.
Wonder if he'll.
Sorry, it wasn't FedEx. It wasn't FedEx. Sorry about that. It's just Amazon. So when you're dealing with an array, make sure you use length. Okay. Like I said, 4 times the increase than using count. And your analyzers, if you're using analyzers to analyze your code, your analyzers should tell you that. And there's something else that's done that I see done a lot in code that I review is making a collection from a collection, right? No matter where that collection came from, you're going to put that into a new collection. Sometimes you do work on it. Sometimes maybe you don't. I don't know. But that's something I see people typically do all the time. Make sure you mute your phones. I appreciate it. Thanks. So here's something I see a lot in a lot of code. Create a list of person, loop through a people collection and, do some work and add that into the new collection, right? The people do this all the time. Now, sometimes if you don't need to do any work, this is really not a great way to do it. Instead, if you can, use add range, okay? Because if you're just taking one collection or putting it into another one, either do it in the constructor or do it with add range, okay? Because those two methods are more performant, as you can see here, than doing it just with, a for or something like that. And I tested it with capacity, without capacity. And you can see here, add range is faster than everything else. So if you can use add range, that's one way to make your creating collections faster. Okay, this is a good one that I discovered. This actually came from my last contract. One of the developers came to me and said, this other new lead developer is making me go through and change all my link statements from X to Y, and he's telling me it's faster, but he can't give me any quantified data to show that it's faster. So I'm coming to you, .NET Dave, to ask you which is faster. And I go, I never actually benchmarked that before. So, when using LINQ, there's two basic ways of using LINQ, right? There's the old, what we call the API style, which you can see there in number 1, which has been around since .NET, since LINQ started, right? And then later came Lambdas, which you can see in example 2. So for these two examples, I'd like to see in the chat, which one do you think is more performant? Or are they the same? Tell me, what do you think? 1 or 2? Same? Same. API, okay. Anybody else? 2, got 1 Lambda. All right, anybody else? 2 Lambdas, 1 API, 2 sames. Okay. Lambda is overall faster. Again, this changes as .NET, new releases of .NET comes out, but generally overall Lambdas are faster than API. So if you can, I really don't use the API method. I haven't used it in a very long time. But if you are, I would probably switch to Lambdas because it is a bit more performant. As you can see here, they're pretty close to the same, right? But what if you do something else with this call, right? So how about if you add a first to it? You can see the speed is dramatically different, okay? And dramatically meaning, 20 nanoseconds, but, that adds up, right? So, the moral of what this shows you is that make sure you benchmark your code. I can't stress that enough, because no matter what I'm telling you here, it might be different in your code base. So make sure you benchmark your code. I should do a session on that because I've been using benchmark.net for so long now. But benchmark your code. As you can see, it can create a lot of differences. Wow, I'm going a lot faster than I thought I would be going. So another thing, one thing at .NET is, with every version of .NET, the team comes out with a new way of doing the same thing, right? Is this actually a chief complaint I hear from developers now is, there's 3 ways to do the same thing at .NET. Which one do I choose, right? And especially coming from performance, they could be different, right? But sometimes they're not, right? So this is the section, if you're using different ways, these are all basically the same, right? So if you're testing for a null in a string using equals or is null or empty, it's basically the same speed. I found this interesting because I was wondering, well, if you use an out compared to just a normal function call, is that any speed difference? Yeah, nope. But I don't typically use outs anyway because I find them confusing, and most developers do. So whether you use outs or not doesn't really matter as far as it comes to performance. So null coalescing, I can't talk today. So before C#8, this is basically how we tested for null, right? We just did table equals null, and that's the way we did it for all those years before .NET 8 came out. And then in .NET 5 or C#8, they added the new coalescing. I cannot pronounce that name today. Anyway, in .NET 8, that's how you do it now. But either way is the same performance. Okay, analyzing code for issues. Since I have some time, 10 minutes. Shoot, I changed my code. I'm just gonna have to talk to this because I cut out the slides. So I'll talk to these tools just because I cut out the slides because I didn't think I'd be going this fast. So, one of the things, you have to use or tools to find out in your code base your performance problems, right? Not only your code problems, but you need to use tools for performance analyzing too. Doing it manually is very time consuming, but none of these tools will find everything. I've never found a tool that found everything. So you're always going to have to use your brain and your eyes to find everything. So the first tool and this is what I do before I check in code. The first tool you should be using now is Analyze in Visual Studio. It's changed, since .NET Framework days and into .NET Core and now .NET. Now we use, the editor config and analyzers. Before we used FX Cop and Roslyn analyzers, and we still use Roslyn analyzers to some degree. But all those can be run through Visual Studio. And so before I check in any code, anywhere, anytime, I run it through Analyze and make sure I clean up everything. And if you want to use the editor config that I use, shoot me an email, because my editor config is pretty strict, and it finds more things than like the default stuff that Microsoft does. But yeah, please send me an email. I'll send you it. There's a link to it on my GitHub repository. So make sure you use Analyze before you check in any code, and not only because it's going to help you with performance problems, but it's going to help you with problems in your code, right? And one thing that I've been experiencing being a contractor, and I've learned these 10 years doing contracting basically is if you hire me, you're in trouble already. So you need to use Analyze, because this will prevent you hiring me. Because if you find the problems right when you're coding it, you can fix it, and it's super cheap, right? If you find the code, 6 months, 5 years, 10 years from now, that's horribly expensive. And that's exactly what I'm dealing with right now, and why it's taken me so long to get anything fixed in this code base, because it is so, they have like over 40,000 code violations in a single solution. So make sure you fix all your code problems and your performance problems, of course. And I think there's a category for performance, I think, in the analyzers. I'm trying to picture it. I think there is. So it comes with Visual Studio, so why not use it? Second is a program I've been using for a really long time. And this works a lot better in the framework. So if you're still using .NET Framework, I definitely recommend Codeit Right from Submain. If you're using .NET Core, I don't recommend it as much, but it will still help you. And so Codeit Right is a tool I've been using for a long time, and it basically checks for the same things that Analyze does and more, right? But the best part about Codeit Right is, I would say 90% of those problems, you click a button and it fixes it for you. I call Codeit Right, I can go to the beach on Fridays, because I can get my stuff done faster, and everybody thinks, it should be taking longer. It saves so much time, I can't even tell you. It's the first time you run it, it pays for itself. So I recommend using Codeit Right, because it makes the refactoring one button click for you, instead of you having to go look up something and figuring out the right way to fix your code. Codeit Right will do it for you. I wish I was getting paid by these companies. Another program that's really useful, I haven't got into a ton because it is pretty expansive, and I have a hard time devoting enough time to really learning how to use it, is Endepend. Does anybody use Endepend out there to look at their code? Check their code? Endepend is another one. It's a lot more stricter than the other ones. You do have to pay for it, but it will find a lot of problems. I can't even go into what everything Endepend does, because it's a pretty big program. But I do use Endepend on this code base I'm working on right now, and it really helps me find things. And I actually use a combination of three things. Two things actually. I use Analyze and I use Endepend to cover all my bases, because Endepend actually finds more than Analyze does. And the last thing, and this is one thing I'll spend a little bit time on. Unfortunately, I cut out the graphics for this. Is a memory profiler, right? I hate to be hard-nosed, but if you're releasing software without running it through a memory profiler first, you shouldn't be doing it, right? Because no matter what tool or what article you read or what code you fix, you will not find everything until you run it through a memory profiler. That's just the way it is. Because none of these tools find everything, right? And my brain can't find anything because, I'm not that brilliant. But you can find everything using a memory profiler. So the memory profiler that I use is called .NET Memory Profiler from Cytex Software. There's a bunch of other ones, including one from Redgate. I've tried all the major ones, and this is the one I like the best, not only because it's easier to use for me at least, and it's not very expensive. A lot of the memory profilers can be very, very, very expensive. This one is, I think it's less than $300. So the first time you use it pays for itself. And if your company doesn't want to give every developer a license, for $300 a year or whatever it costs for that, not every developer needs this. It's mainly the main lead person that needs this, because they're the ones that really understand how memory management works, hopefully, in .NET. So whoever uses this tool really needs to know how memory works and how it cleans up and all that kind of stuff. So if you haven't used a memory profiler before, basically what you do is you run it against running code, right? All these other static analyzers won't find everything, but you need to run it. You need to run your code and then look at it, right? And so .NET Memory Profiler is really, really simple to use. It works on any type of .NET application you have. It's really great. And one thing I tell people, not that most people do this, is you need to run it on a near to production setup server as you can, right? Because you want to mirror as much as you can what's in production. Never run this against production. Never. Because this horribly slows down your program to a crawl, basically. But you need to run it on this basically the same hardware production's running on, because hardware can change things. And what it does is you run it for a certain amount of time. It does, it does memory dumps, and then at the end it analyzes everything, and then it presents you with this really cool list. And unfortunately, you have to manually go through everything and look at everything, and there's a lot of false positives, but it really helps you find things. And the .NET Memory Profiler, you can drill down graphically where it actually started, where the memory problem started. Like one time, quite a while ago, I found something that was actually in the .NET framework. And when I was at Microsoft, I go, hey, you have some kind of issue in your HTTP blah, blah, blah object. And I go, really? And I go, yeah, I can show it to you. So that's how extensive it is. And the other cool thing I like about the memory profiler, and Redgate, I think, does this too, is that you can actually run it and capture the variables that are in the object at the time the problem happens. And that's super, super valuable. It slows down the profiling even more when you do that, but it's very, very valuable information. But I will warn you that, once your profile is done, you need to dedicate a lot of time to analyzing the report, because it does take a lot of time to go through. I don't know of any automated way of doing it. So please, please, please make sure you use a memory profiler before you release, not after. I worked at this one company and I said, we really have to test the performance of our app. And they said, no, we'll do that after it's released. And we lost customers because of it. So anyway, so those are the tools. All that information all the tooling information is detailed in articles on my website. And speaking of my website, what I decided to do was I decided to take, it's not all up there yet, but most of my code performance book and put it online. And so if you go to that QR code, and go to .NETtips.com. There's a place on the top there for this section, the code and app performance section. But in this section, there's tons and tons of articles, some free and some behind a subscription for $5 a month, because you got to pay for my time somehow, right? So I hope you go check that out. But basically everything I told you today is in there. So I go check it out later. So here's some resources. I have a little time for questions at the end. You can go there to pick up any of my books, of course. Oh, that's old. My .NET Tips Utilities. That's my one for .NET Core. It's been renamed. So, but if you go to GitHub real.NET Dave, I'll show you the new Spartan library. And you can get all of my newer stuff on NuGet too. There's a good 256 seconds I recorded. You can go there. That talks about memory. There's another article I wrote, Improve Your Model Classes with OOP, Part 3, Serialization. So I hope you go check that out, because serialization is actually a lot more than people think it is. And so I hope you go check out that article. Here are some of the tools I talked about: CodeRoast from DevExpress, Codeit right from Submain. GoStock from Submain is what I use to document all my code, something else I don't see people doing. Really one of my pet peeves. And then there's the link to the .NET Memory Profiler. And I think that's it. So that's it. That's all I have. I'll open it up we have a couple minutes for questions. Anybody have questions, comments?
Are the slides available?
They're not, but if you go to my website, everything's there, basically what I told you today. What else I was going to say about that? I forgot. If you wanted like a PDF of my slides, just email me and I'll send them to you. I just stopped doing that a long time ago because it's some work, and I didn't feel people were actually, getting my slides anyway. So, any other questions?
You talked about Code Rush.
Yes.
Going someplace and you can actually get a copy of it or something if it do something. I can't remember. This was early.
Oh,
on.
yes. So tomorrow is my show, Rockin' the Code World with .NET Dave. It's every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, where I interview big hitters in our world, from everybody from Scott Hunter on down. I haven't got to the top Scott yet. I'm working on it. And it's a really popular show. I get up to 16,000 people watching it a week. And every week, if you watch, you can get a free copy of Code Rush. And it's a real copy of Code Rush. It's not a stripped down version or anything like that. It's a real copy, and you can go use Code Rush. So if you're not using a refactoring tool, you need to do it. Either use ReSharper or Code Rush. The refactoring in Visual Studio is not that good. It will never be good. Just get a tool to do it for you. It'll dramatically improve, your coding speed. And also you learn stuff from these tools too. That's one thing I always tell people is, yeah, these tools cost money, but all the tools I've told you about teach you how to do things the right way. And so they're definitely worth every penny your company spends on them. Any other questions? I don't see any in the chat. Those of you who are shy to talk. Oh, and I'm really bummed I couldn't come to Philadelphia. I don't know if you guys were there, but I came there in 2018 to speak at the Code Camp, and I got to go see I was actually born in Delaware, and I actually got to, all my relatives live in Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, and I got to see them after I spoke at Code Camp, and so that was a lot of fun.
You can visit your relatives without going to Code Camp.
But then some... But I don't want to pay for it.
Hey, kudos on the priest in the encore video. Nice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. See, I was telling someone that the other day. I was actually telling my boss. I was telling him, I got picked. I'm so excited. I got picked up by the NDC conference in Australia. I'll be going to Australia in June, and he goes, you have to pay for that? I go, no, that's why I apply to those conferences. So I can go to Australia and be a tourist and somebody else pays for the ticket. So that's why I do that stuff. I don't travel to conferences unless someone's paying for it anymore. Any other questions? I grew up in North Wilmington. Yeah, I was born in Wilmington. I think they turned my hospital into a condo building now, but I actually was born like within a week or two of Valerie Bertinelli. And I think Billy Idol was born there too. I have to look that up again, but something with my birth date and Billy Idol lines up too somehow. So anyway. Where in Delaware? Yeah, so I was born in Wilmington, and then we moved to Newark before my parents moved to Arizona, and then I've been in California, ever since I joined the Navy when I was 19, and so I never left. Why would I? Right. Any other questions, comments? Smile. Thank you.
Just got your book.
Awesome. Thank you. The kids in India will thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I've been a musician for like 30 years, so I like your style. So I thought, and I'm just new to .NET, so I thought that would be a pretty cool book for me. So
yeah, thank you very much. Actually, speaking of musician, I used to work in the #1 heavy metal band in San Diego back in the 80s, and actually, the last day of my current contract is Tuesday, and Wednesday I'm going up to Oregon to a place called Coos Bay. I've never been there before, and the reason I'm going there is because the guitarist from that band invited me years ago to come up anytime I want. And I go, hey, I got some time to kill, so I'm going up to Oregon next week to hang out with him. It's going to be a really great time. I'm going to meet his new family, and he's playing too, so I'm probably going to end up playing with his band. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I actually, so there's 2 venues in San Diego that were always on my bucket list to play. One is the House of Blues, which I haven't got to play at yet. I'm working on that. But the other one is this famous place called the Belly Up. And I was able to play there once at a sold out show, and that was so much fun. Oh my gosh. I got videos from that. It's really, really fun. That's my favorite music venue of all of San Diego is the Belly Up. And I was really glad I got to play that one time. So
Yeah, that's cool. There's nothing like the adrenaline of being on stage, man.
yeah. And if you don't know this, you can go to my website and find out. But I also am an award-winning photographer, and most of the work I do now are for bands. And so when big recording acts come into town, they call me, like Queensryche and who else have I done? Buck Cherry, Lit. Eric Johnson, POD, lots of other bands. Queensryche especially, they call me every single time. They go, Dave, we're coming into town. We want you to take pictures. Like, okay.
You're like
me
the
a
next
photo
Niels
pass.
Lozauer, huh?
Huh?
You're like the next Niels Lozauer.
Yeah. But it's really fun for me because not only because I've been doing photography since I've been a little kid, but when I get to marry that with music, that's just the best thing for me. And but the biggest reward I get out of it is when band members, like the lead singer of Queensryche, says, this is one of the best pictures I've ever seen. I want a copy so I can put on my wall. So basically, every member of Queensryche has pictures of my pictures on their walls at home. And I think that's pretty cool,
That's Todd now, right? You're not talking about Jeff, but Todd.
No, I'm talking about Jeff. Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about Jeff. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I don't know if Todd has my pictures. I gave him a picture the last time I saw him about 2 years ago. I don't know if it's on his wall, but so one thing I learned when I first started doing pictures with Queensryche is I did some pictures, and then the next time I went to see them, this is something I do, is the next time I see a band, then I take the pictures I took of them previously, and I try to get them to autograph it for me, right? And they all do, right? It's not a question, but So one time I was actually in Arizona doing photography for Queensryche. This is before Jeff left the band. And Michael Wilton, who's now the lead guitarist from Queensryche, I gave him this picture. I took him of him at the House of Blues here in San Diego, which is actually one of my favorite pictures I've taken of him. And he goes, dude, where can I get a copy of this? And I go, well, I can send you one. He goes, okay. He gives me the information. So now every time I see Queensryche, I bring them copies, not only to sign, but for them.
That's awesome, man.
And they
That's
take them
really
home.
cool.
Yeah. It's I have a lot of fun doing that. It's my favorite. So I'm actually going to do it for my friend's band next week as he's playing. I'm going to take my good camera. I've got a brand new Nikon mirrorless camera, and I'm going to take it up there and do pictures for his band while I'm up there. So.
Yeah, some guy got one good shot of me on like this little stage one time, and it's like my favorite picture. I mean, I was so glad that and he posted it on our Facebook page, and I grabbed it because I was just like, that's the coolest picture of me I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, since there's still people here, I don't know why, but I was actually one time I was at Microsoft, at the MVP Summit, and I get a call on my phone. You know who it is? It's Jeff Tate's wife. She's calling me on my phone, and I'm going, why is she calling me? And they needed my permission to use one of my favorite pictures of Jeff. If you email me, I'll send you what I'm talking about. Not only to use on Facebook, but they were going to put it on the next release. If you don't know Jeff has got his own line of wine, right? He started this a long time ago. And I would say 12, 13 years ago, he started his own wine label. And they wanted to use that picture on the next release of his wine. And yeah, unfortunately, it didn't happen. But man, that was just them asking me to do that was just the biggest reward, Anyway, Bill, were you saying something? Nope.
Sorry. Where in California do you live?
Oh, I live in San Diego. I live about a mile from the beach.
Okay.
Yeah, I live in Del Mar. Well, I live right next to Del Mar, which Del Mar is sandwiched right in between La Jolla and Rancho Santa Fe. But yeah, that's where I live. I've lived here ever since I was 19, basically. Yeah. Ran a marathon there. Was that the rock and roll marathon? It's really, really popular here. I love San Diego too, as you could tell. I can't afford to live here, but I'm still here. Oh, it was the rock and roll marathon. So yeah, that's really popular. I've actually never gone to it, but I think it's pretty cool if you get to do a marathon and every so often there's a live band playing. I mean, how much better? I couldn't do the marathon because I'd stop and watch the band. Yeah, San Diego's awesome. It's got the best weather in the country. You can't beat our weather, hands down. So, but it's super expensive to live here. Like, our gas has been over $5 for a while now. So this Russia thing is just making it worse. Some places in California, I heard this morning, the gas is up to $6 a gallon. So thank goodness I work from home. I don't have to pay all that freaking gas costs anymore. And if you guys have never been to San Diego, you need to come. There's so much fun things to do here and so many world famous things here, like the zoo and Balboa Park and Coronado Island, we're one of the 5 grand hotels in America, or there's one there called the Hotel Del. You can never run out of things to do in San Diego. That's for sure.
Been there, done that. My wife was very impressed by the Navy SEALs running down the beach in training.
Yeah. Yes.
I never saw her stare so intently.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, there's somebody died through doing the haze, the whatever they call the Hell Week or whatever it's called. They have people die on, I wouldn't say a regular basis, but too often during that week. But yeah, that's here. And the Marine base is here. The Navy base is long gone. I actually went to boot camp here when the Navy base was still here, but it left a long time ago. But yeah, there's just, and if you go to La Jolla, there's actually a place called Seal Beach where they keep going back and forth, but most of the time it's blocked off from people because people are idiots and they bother the seals, and so they usually block it off. But Seal Beach, you can go right there, and I mean, you're just a couple feet from these huge seals, stuff like that. And when my son went to like surf camp here in San Diego, he would actually, they'd go surfing down in La Jolla, and he said when he was out in the water, the seals would just come up to him and just play around with him in the water. And I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, I've seen the seals. This is Todd. I'm the guy who wrote about the marathon. I combine running and code. You combine rock and code, so that's fine. I made him comment. Coos Bay is also the home of Steve Prefontaine, who was a big distance runner from the 70s who died in a car accident. So you'll probably hear his name a lot when you go out there. Also, I just love hearing all of the stories that you've been talking about rock. It's been pretty cool.
Oh man, I have so many stories.
I'm sure you do.
And a lot of them I can't repeat publicly like this, right? When you work for the #1 heavy metal band in San Diego, I think most of those stories I don't tell people because, yeah, it's not my story to tell. Oh, those were the days. But yeah, I try to integrate. If you could tell with my slide presentation, I try to integrate my love for, music, code, photography, and even graphic arts. Everything you see on my slide decks, I've done myself. I do all the graphic arts and videos that you see on my site and on my slides and everything. So.
Best slides I've seen today.
Yeah, you know what? One time I was at a conference and I cut the videos out of these because it screws up when you're doing it virtually. But all of my decks used to have backing videos on the background, even slides like this. And one time this woman came up to me and she goes, "Are you using PowerPoint?" I go, "Yes." I abuse PowerPoint. Let's put it that way. I had to go to PowerPoint team for 2 years to get them to fix PowerPoint so I can put large video files in it. And that's because that's why they work now, is because I kept pestering the PM at PowerPoint because my slide decks were failing because I reached this size limit in PowerPoint that PowerPoint just starts farting out on you. So they have fixed it now, though, thankfully. All right, everybody's leaving. So those of you who are left, thanks for checking out my session. There's the info to contact me. I'm always willing to answer questions and chat with you guys if you want to. But thanks, Bill, for having me for Code Camp, and hopefully next year I can come out to Philly and do it in person.
Excellent. Rock on.
Rock
Great.
on.
Have a great
Have
weekend.
fun with your friend.
Thanks, and don't forget to watch my show tomorrow. I'm going to have Richard Campbell on. It's going to be a lot of fun.